As you're starting to figure out what exactly you want to do with your custom flows, it may make sense to set up some of them as real-time exports. You can see here in this view, I'm within my integration, I have my flows. We do have the option to schedule flows or allow them to run in real time. If you haven't checked out our video about how to schedule your flows, definitely make sure you do that. We go through how to set up your flows on either a preset schedule or some options for more granular, more flexible scheduling as well. But let's focus on this real-time option here. When we say real-time, essentially we are setting up our export to be able to run anytime certain actions occur. So we're going to click into one of these. You can see right away when I look at this, it doesn't say export. Usually I would see export. Instead it says listener. When you set up a flow to run in real time, you are setting up what's called a listener. You may have heard the phrase webhook listener. So webhook listeners are two parts, the webhook and the listener. The listener, as you can see here, is the piece that lives in the platform. It's on the receiving end. The webhook is actually in your application. So in that source endpoint, if in this case we're working with NetSuite, if you're working with another application, as long as it supports webhook technology, we can set it up. Just a quick note, there are definitely some applications that do support webhook technology, but maybe call it something different. I know the SMS service Twilio, for example, uses a different name, so make sure you check out the API documentation. You understand whether or not webhook technology is supported. But working under the assumption it is, the webhook lives in that application. It's going to send out a signal anytime certain actions occur. So let's say an order's placed, a return is initiated, a shipment is received. All of those can act essentially as triggers, so that signal gets pushed out. The listener in the platform is going to receive that signal, and that is going to trigger your flow to run. This is going to make sense in a lot of cases where it's time sensitive. If you're in an e-commerce industry, you want to make sure that those orders are going out when they need to, right? So using a listener might be a good idea. As soon as that order is placed, you're on top of it. That flow is going to run. One consideration, if it is not time sensitive, maybe if there are additional steps that need to occur, such as approval from another department before running, it would definitely be better to schedule those. Using a listener is going to put additional strain on your connection. So it is going to run anytime an action occurs. If you don't need that, we can definitely look at scheduling instead. But for those more time-sensitive cases, that's how it works. You go in, you set up that listener. I do want to demonstrate what that looks like kind of from scratch. So we're going to head into our Flow Builder view. I'm going to give this a name. I'll just use NetSuite since that's what we just saw. NetSuite Listener 2, since we already have one. When we add our source, typically we would start typing here. We're going to find NetSuite under our connectors. And then we have this option under what would you like to do. We're not going to select export records. Instead, we are going to choose this option to listen for real-time data from the source application. From there, because I have some existing listeners, I could certainly pull one of those, or I can create from scratch. After that, you are going to name your listener. Make sure you do have an active connection, whether you're creating a new one or using an existing one. And then you're going to need to configure that real-time export. All of these options here are going to be outlined in the API documentation for the API you're working with. However, for this one and for others, you can see some of it is pre-populated with what's standard. So for NetSuite, the execution context and type already filled in for me because it's a pre-built listener, although I do have the option to add or edit if necessary as well. So creating that listener really similar to an export. Once that is set up, again, that's going to allow those flows to run in real time anytime that webhook sends out a signal.